I remember the exact moment everything began to feel wrong. It was an ordinary weekday morning, the kind that blends into every other one when you've been married for decades. I stood in the kitchen, staring out the window as my husband's car disappeared down the street. The smell of his coffee still lingered, but the house felt hollow. Only after the sound of the engine faded did I realize how tense my body was. My hands were shaking, gripping the countertop like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Instead of going back to my bedroom, I went upstairs. I walked past the room my husband and I shared and stopped in front of the room that once belonged to my son. It was my mother's room now. I hesitated before opening the door, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't fully explain yet. Inside, everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful, I went straight to the bookshelf, reached behind a framed photo, and felt the small, hidden object taped there. The camera was still in place. All I had to do was remove the memory card. But to understand why I ever hid a camera in my own home, you need to know what led me there. My name's Yolanda. I'm 56 years old, a retired teacher, and until recently, I believed I had lived a stable, predictable life. I was married to Michael for 30 years. We raised 2 children together, or at least we tried to. 7 years ago, we lost our son, Daniel, to cancer. Losing a child doesn't just break your heart, it changes the air inside your home. Michael buried himself in work. I buried myself in memories. We stayed together, but something essential between us quietly disappeared. Then my mother, Bernice, began to decline. She was strong her entire life, but dementia crept in slowly. Forgotten keys, repeated stories. Then one night, she left the stove on and nearly caused a fire. I knew then she couldn't live alone anymore. With no other options, I asked Michael if she could move in. He agreed, but only if I took full responsibility. At the time, I felt grateful. I didn't realize I was agreeing to something that would change everything. The first few weeks after my mother moved in were almost comforting. The house felt alive again. We ate meals together. We talked. I believed we were healing. But then winter came, and with it, something shifted. My mother became withdrawn. She barely ate. And every time Michael entered the room, I noticed fear flicker across her face. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things until I saw the bruise. It was deep and discolored, shaped like fingers pressing into her arm. When I asked about it, she covered it quickly and avoided my eyes. That was the first time my stomach dropped with real fear. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she whispered something that echoed in my mind long after the lights were out. "Please, lock the door." And that was when I knew this wasn't just in my head. I didn't know it yet, but what I was about to discover would shatter everything I believed about my marriage. After that night, I started paying attention in a way I never had before. I watched my mother's body language, her silences, the way her appetite vanished whenever Michael was home. During the day, when it was just the 2 of us, she was almost herself again. She laughed softly, she ate, she talked, but the moment she heard his car pull into the driveway, it was like someone flipped a switch inside her. Her shoulders would tense, her voice would drop, she would retreat into herself. One evening, Michael had to stay late at work. I cooked my mother's favorite meal, and she ate every bite. She even asked for more. Later, while we sat together watching television, she reached for my hand. "Lee," she said quietly, "does Michael mind that I'm here?" The question felt like a punch to the chest. I reassured her, but I could tell she didn't fully believe me. That doubt followed me for days. Not long after, I overheard Michael speaking to her in the kitchen. His voice was low and sharp, nothing like the warm tone he used around me. I stopped halfway down the stairs, listening. My mother responded so softly I could barely hear her. Then I stepped forward, and instantly his voice changed, friendly, casual, almost cheerful. He smiled at me like nothing had happened. My mother stared at the floor. That was when the pieces began to connect. I confronted him about the bruise. He dismissed it immediately, said elderly skin bruises easily, said dementia makes people confused. Somehow, by the end of the conversation, I felt foolish for even asking, but the doubt didn't go away. It grew. At night, I barely slept. Every small noise jolted me awake. I lay still beside my husband, listening to the house breathe. I noticed the sound of floorboards more than I ever had before. I started wondering what happened when I wasn't awake to see it. That's when the idea came to me, quiet, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. A camera, the thought made me sick. Spying on my own husband felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. The image of my mother's bruised arm and her whispered fear outweighed everything else. The next day, I bought a small hidden camera, disguised as an everyday object. I paid in cash and drove far from home so no one would recognize me. That night, while Michael watched television, I hid it behind a photo frame in my mother's room. I told myself I was just being cautious, but deep down, I knew I was preparing to see something I might never be able to forget. That night, when I heard the floorboard creak, I realized the camera was about to show me the truth. I lay in bed pretending to sleep, my body rigid, my mind alert. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock. Hours passed. Just when I started to think I was wrong, I heard itsy, unmistakable creak of the hallway floor. Michael got out of bed. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't move. I listened as the bedroom door opened and closed. Then, moments later, I heard another door open down the hall. My mother's door. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it would give me away. Somewhere in the darkness, the hidden camera was recording everything. The next morning, I waited until Michael left for work. My hand shook as I removed the memory card and slipped it into my laptop. For a moment, I stared at the screen, afraid to press play. Then I did. The video was grainy and dark, but clear enough. I watched my husband enter my mother's room without turning on the light. He shook her awake, roughly. His voice was cold, sharp, filled with anger I had never heard before. He called her a burden, said she was ruining his life. When she tried to speak, he grabbed her arm. I felt physically ill. Night after night, the recordings showed more of the same. Verbal abuse, threats, bruises forming exactly where I had seen them. Then one night, it escalated. I watched him force pills into her mouth, pills she wasn't prescribed, pills meant to keep her quiet. That was the moment fear turned into urgency. This wasn't just cruelty, this was dangerous. I saved every video. I labeled them carefully. During the day, I acted normal. I smiled. I cooked dinner. I played the role of a loving wife. Inside, I was unraveling. I couldn't tell my mother what I knew. If he suspected anything, the abuse could get worse or he could destroy the evidence. I was trapped in silence. Finally, I reached out to a lawyer. When she watched the videos, her expression hardened immediately. "This is elder abuse," she said, "and it's a felony." She told me the next step was medical documentation, a doctor, an official record. The following morning, I took my mother to her longtime physician. Once we were alone, I told him everything. I watched my mother's face as I spoke. When he asked her if it was true, she nodded. Double quotes, yes, she whispered. That single word broke my heart and healed it at the same time. When the doctor picked up the phone, I knew there was no turning back. The police arrived quietly, without sirens or urgency, but the weight of their presence filled the room. They listened carefully as the doctor explained what he had documented. Then they watched the video. No one spoke while it played. When it ended, one of the officers looked at me and said, "We'll take it from here." The rest of the day felt unreal. I went home with my mother and waited. Every sound made my nerves jump. When Michael walked through the door that evening, acting like nothing was wrong, I felt sick. He kissed my cheek, asked about dinner, sat on the couch like an ordinary man. Then there was a knock at the door. The officers stood outside, calm and firm. They asked Michael to step forward. When they said the words elder abuse, his face drained of color. He looked at me, confused, then angry, then empty. They handcuffed him and led him away. I stood there, shaking, watching 30 years of marriage disappear down the driveway in the back of a police car. That night, my mother slept peacefully for the first time in months. I stayed awake, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming weight of what had happened. The house was quiet, but for the first time, it felt safe. I thought the nightmare was over. But healing, I learned, is its own kind of battle. In the days that followed, the reality settled in. Restraining orders, court dates, paperwork. I filed for divorce without hesitation. The man I loved was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. My mother slowly began to heal. The fear in her eyes faded. She laughed more, ate more, slept better. And every time I looked at her, I knew I had made the right choice. See, if it came at the cost of everything I once believed in, I lost a husband, but I saved my mother, and I would do it again without hesitation. Sometimes the truth destroys your life so it can finally save someone else's.